In each form of competition, there will be those that rule over others, that redefine what it means to be at the top, leaving behind a legacy that possibly may never be matched. Although a game like Osu can seem simple, I mean, you do just click circles to the rhythm of a song. But if it really were that simple, the game wouldn't really go anywhere, as what makes the game so intriguing is how complex it can get and its dedicated community. These two factors have allowed the game to become the longest standing and most popular rhythm game of all time. Within it, top players are ranked according to their accumulative top 100 PP plays, PP meaning performance points. It's an arbitrary system that no one really knows how it fully works. I'm pretty sure the developers don't either. But to briefly explain, the harder the map, the more performance points it'll give. But there are many, and I mean many exceptions. However, for this video, understanding the system to a more complex level will not be necessary. And obviously, the player with the highest top 100 PP plays is going to be rank 1. The big problem with this system is that it has always favored some sort of skill sets more than others, and currently, the meta are speed maps. This means that maps with higher BPMs and circle densities will be much more favorable. But considering these metas change over the years, it is hard for players to adapt and learn new skill sets to stay at the top for prolonged periods of time. And as the player base naturally becomes better and better throughout generations, it becomes even harder to stay at the top with the ever-changing metas. However, there are those who rise to the occasion, certified Osu veterans who have been able to continuously improve and stay afloat over the many years, and by far the most impressive case is with Rafis. Now, why is that, you may ask? Well, he has been in the top 50 for quite some time. But how long? 3 years? 5 years? Wrong. Rafis entered the top 50 on July 9, 2014, and has stayed there ever since. An entire decade spent in the top 50, taking the number 1 position countless times and still managing to set game-breaking records. Now, I do have to disclose that he is the second person to ever do so, the first one being his national brother Wobblewolf, who was in the top 50 from 2009 to 2019. But I believe that it is much harder to stay at the top nowadays, as the competition has become much more fierce and players can adapt and improve much faster than before. I mean, have you heard of this Evoxa guy? But if there ever was another player who could have repeated this feat that Wobblewolf achieved, it would definitely be Rafis. But who is Rafis? Before we delve into who Rafis is and his unrepeatable history, we first should look at the game itself, Osu. It is the year 2005 and everybody is obsessed with the recently released Nintendo DS. One such person was Dean Herbert, or better known by his online alias as Peppy. See, unlike most people who played games about an Italian plumber, Peppy had his eyes set on a game called Os Tatake Owendon. Yeah, you can see some resemblances with something else. Peppy wasn't satisfied with the game, so he decided to make a PC port of it, and on July 1st, 2007, the very first ever version of Osu was released. Sort of. The game was only available to Peppy and some of his friends. However, this wouldn't be for long, as the game was released to the public on September 17th, 2007. The game was much more simple back then. It was just circles, sliders, and spinners, the 3 mechanics that are still prevalent nowadays. Over the following months, the game would receive some expansions and just general quality of life updates. Players were able to make their own skins, more mods were added, and most importantly, tablet support. As you might have noticed, most Osu players opt to use a tablet, in large part because of the way tablets work. The specific area on your tablet corresponds to your computer display, so a specific position on screen will always be the same relative spot on the tablet. And why this is better than mouse theoretically? Well, it's because while playing with mouse, you need to adjust your position over time because of mouse drift. Back in these ancient days of Osu, top players were ranked according to their total score. But obviously the problem with this system was that the maps that were more challenging were just not as rewarding because it was much more difficult to full combo them. The system favored those who were willing to play more maps rather than more challenging maps, with two main exceptions: Cookiezi and Wobblewolf. Even with this old and less skill-based ranking, both Wobblewolf and Cookiezi had taken the #1 position. Back in 2010, these two players redefined what a good player was, especially Cookiezi. He was in a league of his own, being voted as the best player both in 2010 and 2011. But it was time for the game to change. In the month of April 2012, PPV1 was released. This was a new way of ranking the best players in the game with the infamous performance point system, or PP. These values were based on the mods used, the accuracy of a play, the map's general difficulty, and the most controversial component of them all, the map's popularity? Maps that were more popular gave more PP, as there were more people competing for a position on the leaderboard. Besides Cookiezi and Wobblewolf, who are still the undisputed kings, two new faces would jump into the mix, Raruchi and Sayonara Bai, who would be at the top of the leaderboard with the new ranking changes. Then came the year 2013. An unknown individual at the time was hanging out with his friends on Mumble. Everything was normal until one of them recommended a quote, fun music game called Osu. This person would then go onto the Osu website and register under the nickname Rafis. He played some maps from popular creators at the time like DJ Pop and Osu Player 111, better known as Andrea. He would be like this for about 3 weeks and then he just kind of stopped. And this is actually a pretty common thing with a lot of Osu players. But while Rafis was still testing the waters with Osu, the debate over who was the best player in the game would continue. And although most people would give the upper hand to Cookiezi, the skill of Raruchi was not to be underestimated. And the debate wouldn't be settled. It would end. On November 11th, 2013, Cookiezi would pull off one of his most infamous moves by purposefully submitting a cheated score to ban himself. He did this because he was fed up with the game, the staff, and his physical health was also suffering. This was an interesting shift because everything that Cookiezi had done in the game would be gone. This includes his scores, replays, and his profile. All that was left of him was his legacy and the replays that people had saved. And while all that was happening, Rafis was slowly regaining an interest in the game, as in the month of November, he would put in over 4,000 plays and would only increase this number over the following months. The game would also experience one of the biggest shifts up to that point, as in January 2014, what was known as PPV1 would turn into PPV2. The biggest change was the removal of maps' popularity that influenced the PP values. Rather, the focus was now on how hard a ranked map was. If the map was harder to full combo, it would give more PP. It didn't matter if it was popular or not. This would pave the way for a new generation of top players who had previously been undervalued. The most integral to the story being Snow White, or as most people know him, HVIC225. Speaking of top players, Rafis would continue to grind the game, putting thousands upon thousands of plays each month. His immense grinding would result in a rapid rate of improvement as he would enter the top 100 on June 24, 2014. And in no time he would reach the top 50, which he managed to do on July 9th of the same year. Also keep in mind, this was barely a year after he first started playing the game, so he would start catching many people's eyes. His immense dedication allowed him to quickly adapt to new metas, which was especially key in late 2014. Because of PPV2, the game would start changing at a much more rapid pace. Players who failed to adapt to the more modern approaches to mapping were left behind, as newer maps gave more PP to players who were able to play them. This was the time when the double time mod, or DT, was becoming a fan favorite for gaining performance points. And since HVIC and Sayonara Bai were some of the best at it, Hiruchi, the #1 player at the time, stood no chance at holding that position. And although HVIC and Sayonara Bai sort of dominated the field, Rafis was not too far behind. The funny thing is, Rafis was still relatively new to the game, so much so that he didn't know the term approach rate until he entered the top 20. But he wouldn't be in the top 20 for long, as he would enter the top 10 in September 2014. Although he was still far from HVIC and Sayonara Bai, he was not someone who players could brush off. To top off 2014, Rafis would hover around the rank 6 and 7. He was also correspondingly voted as the 7th best player in the game by the annual community player rankings. But 2015 would be a year that the Polish guy would not forget. He would continue to play the game pretty actively, setting a lot of 400s and 500s in the beginning of the year. It is also pretty cool to see him play speed maps upwards of 270 BPM, like this one. His ability to pump out scores on multitudes of maps allowed him to continue climbing up the ranks, entering the top 5 in April, and after being stuck there for a couple of months, he decided to play Miraizu, an infamous DT farm map. The play being worth 596 PP propelled him from rank 6 all the way up to the #2 position. Although HVIC was a fair bit in front, Rafis was a serious contender for the position and was showing no signs of slowing down. To further prove his inevitable dominance, not too long prior, a map by the name of Everything Will Freeze was ranked, and at the time, it was one of, if not the hardest ranked map. Before Rafis took a hand at this map, there were 2 no-mod passes, and the rest were halftime scores. But once he finally decided to play the map, he did this.
Okay, go.
To further highlight how insane this score was compared to literally everyone else, although he slider broke at around the 1k combo point, he was holding an S rank for 2/3 of the map. He had over 99% accuracy as well. He would hold the S rank up until the very end, chain missing at the hardest part of the map. There was quite literally no one else who was able to submit a better score than him at the time, and it would be like that for a very good while. During this period of time, Rafis was also one of the best, if not the best 3-mod player. Most people just weren't able to read such a high AR, and after the summer of 2015 was over, Rafis decided to showcase what he was capable of with this skill set by setting a brand new PP record.
I pressed a choke.
Funny enough, this play was worth 666 PP, a literal devilish play. He was quickly lowering the gap between him and HVIC, and come the end of November, Rafis would achieve the peak. Finally, after just 2.5 years of playing the game, Rafis became the best at it. Or so it seemed. You see, there's a certain someone we haven't mentioned in a while.
The situation with him was like really, no one knew what was going on. And from our perspective, we didn't even know if the guy that was contacting us to get the unban was even Shigetora himself. I just wanted to be sure about his, that we were dealing with the real guy.
After being banned for over 2 years and a nice dinner with the creator of the game, Kokizi was able to finally log into his old account. Although everything he ever did in the game was gone, he would make up for it in almost no time. His comeback was massive, and he was able to reach the top 10 by the end of 2015. But both Rafis and HVIC were over 1,000 PP away from the rest of the competition, so Kokizi wouldn't enter the battle for a little while. Rafis and HVIC would interchange spots pretty often, both pumping out 600 PP scores left and right. And even though Wolf would set a new PP record of 667, that barely did anything to bring him closer to the competition. Sorry, Mr. Wolf. It was becoming clear that Rafis was outclassing HVIC, not just in rank, but also in skill. And to further prove this, Rafis made his tournament debut in OWC 2015. Looking back through OSU history, OWC is probably the most important tournament there is, and while with the 2015 iteration, most focus on the insane grand finale that was China vs USA, Poland also were having the time of their lives as they had a stellar performance. They would begin by flawlessly winning against Norway and Austria, and most people assumed something similar would happen in their next match against China. However, what actually happened was possibly the biggest upset of the tournament. Team China would just not let Poland rest at all, and although the Polish guys would take 2 points, that would be it for them against China and they would be sent to the losers bracket.
They are dropping down to the losers bracket and China will go through and face the United States. Who would have thought?
Wow.
Yeah, that's all there is to say, isn't there? Wow.
In losers bracket, Poland would face off Germany. They would sweep the competition and move towards lower bracket semifinals, facing Team South Korea. And although South Korea had an incredible run in the past, since the previous year's OWC, they were not able to even get to the top 3. And while Poland finished in second, they did it without Rafis, so I'm only mentioning it here. The same fate would happen this year, as Poland would nearly dominate the Koreans, though they did allow them to slip in 2 points before taking match point. Poland had secured a top 3 finish alongside Team USA and China. In the lower bracket finals, Team Poland had to face the Western team, which were having a run of their lifetimes that year. And almost every year from then on. Almost. Unfortunately, the Polish team would lose, but for Rafis, this would mean that he'd get his first ever profile badge, as him and his team would finish in the top 3. This was a great way for Rafis to end the year. He was number 1, he had a stellar OWC performance, and even if HVIC decided to surpass him in rank, Rafis could easily overtake him. However, there was a certain someone in the top 10 who had something else to say about it, and come the year 2016, he would go in full force. On January 3rd, Kokizi would shatter the aforementioned PP record by setting the first 700 PP play in the form of a 1-miss Blue Zenith Hard Rock FC choke, worth 727 PP. This era of Osu can only be described as Kokizi toying around with what was possible, as 6 days after his Blue Zenith score, he would FC Everything Will Freeze. Even though Everything Will Freeze is not really a farm map, it still granted him a lot of PP. With these 2 timeless scores, Kokizi would go from rank 9 all the way up to top 3, which was now made up of HVIC, who did overtake Rafis, Rafis himself, and Kokizi. The funny thing is, Kokizi wasn't even satisfied with the score because he had prior runs that were much higher in accuracy. Oh, and by the way, the second best score on the map was still Rafis' run from November. This score would not be surpassed for nearly 2 years. And in the midst of all this, what was Rafis doing? Probably playing Euro Truck Simulator. His break from pumping out high PP scores allowed HVIC and Kokizi to create an over 500 PP gap, with HVIC also becoming the second person in the game to set a 700 PP score on Dream Solister. Kukizi was also not stopping. Although he didn't care about performance points, because he was so good at the game, basically any map he played gave him PP, like his FC on Uda with Hidden. It seemed like Rafis was content, but we all know that this is not even close to over for Rafis. He would fight back, and fight back he did. This was a score that neither Kukizi nor HVIC could match, and it showed what Rafis was capable of and why he should not be dismissed. The battle for number 1 would continue, however it would be without HVIC as he was losing interest not just in the battle, but also the game. The rivalry between Kukizi and Rafis was becoming the biggest battle in the history of Osu, both players representing two different playstyles, creating the perfect rivalry. This difference was best represented when both would set back-to-back 700 PP plays with their respective mod combinations, with Kukizi FCing Gimme Chocolate with Hidden Hard Rock, and Rafis FCing Caffeine Fighter with Hidden DT Hard Rock. This would be a common theme between the two. However, there was a player lurking in the shadows, someone who resembled that of HVIC, even setting a new PP record. That obviously was none other than Angel Megami, better known as Angelsum. What stood out about him was that he was the first player in a very long time that was at the highest level with a mouse. Many fans of the top player battle started to turn their heads towards Angelsum. The main cope was that Angelsum was a mouse player, therefore he was more impressive. But enough of that. Because although a debate between who was the best player between the three was a hot topic, it would get settled quickly because Kukizi would set the most infamous score in the game's history. The first ever 800 PP play, arguably the most ahead of its time score, especially considering that today, after many PP reworks, the play is worth 939 PP, theoretically meaning that Kukizi skipped 800 PP in 2016. And for some context, the first 900 PP play was set in September 2018, 2 years after Kukizi's Freedom Dive score. It was becoming very apparent that Rafis had steep competition at hand. Some new faces that some may recognize would also arrive, one of them being Baxay.
Unlimited bacon.
Alongside him there was also Fils de Lama, who was essentially a French version of Rafis. He was able to play 3-mod at a really high level, even able to outclass Rafis at some of his maps. Not to mention HVIC, who was still actually putting up a pretty decent fight. And going into the year 2017, it was not looking like it was possible to overtake Kukizi by anyone. He would jumpstart the year by setting arguably 2 of his most ahead of his time scores. A hidden hard rock reverse choke on everything will freeze, missing on a relatively easy stream and hitting the hardest part of the map. This score is just absurd, and even though there have been some hard rock FCs in the past years, this is the only substantial hidden hard rock run on the map. And this score is almost 8 years old, and February would be no different. And over 99% choke on Yomi Yori with Hidden. There are not many words in the English dictionary that could describe these two scores and the legacy they uphold to this day. And unfortunately, during this time, Rafis wasn't really showing any signs of potentially overtaking his competitors. Although he was honing his skills on speed maps such as the Pretender and passing a 10-star map in Sunglasses, in terms of PP scores, there was silence. It also didn't help that Kokizi FC'd remote control and got yet another 800 PP play. Although this time, the score wasn't as unique as the Freedom Dive score, because just a mere 5 hours later, Vaxei would snipe him on the very map, becoming the second person in the game to get an 800 PP play. This play allowed Vaxei to come even closer to overtaking Rafis, and after pumping some more 500s and 600s, he would jump to rank 2, pushing Rafis down to the number 4 spot. It would be like this for quite some time, and while Kokizi and Vaxei were pumping out many diverse scores, Rafis was...
Hello, Moto. Weź ogarnij coś.
For some context, he and his friend went to a TV studio and just recited some lyrics from a popular Polish song. But since I don't understand Polish, this also could have been a threat message to the other top players.
Kurwa nie ma. Siema, siema, siema. Pozdrowienia z podziemia.
Rafis would come back big time, setting 2 600 PP scores and a 700 PP play on Yume Toro with 3 mod, entering the top 3, overtaking Phils the Llama.
I want to dedicate this one to Phils the Llama. Cheers, dude.
Even though Rafis and Vaxei were very fierce, treading the number 2 spot pretty often, Kokizi was too far ahead and would remain number 1 for the remainder of the year. And since the end of the year was approaching, it was time for something special. It was time for the annual Osu World Cup tournament. The previous 2 years were not just won, but dominated by the juggernaut that was Team USA. And most people are betting on them winning again, because I mean, look at their roster. They had some of the best tournament players during the time. But the same thing could be said about the Polish team. Not only did they have one of the longest standing legends in Osu, that being Wobblefulf, but they also had Rafis.
Co? Windows kurwa update!
And this roster proved to be a powerhouse, not losing any matches in the brackets, beating out Austria and Brazil. But then came the United States. It seemed more than predictable. The United States was at match point when Poland had won only a single map. It was not looking bright for them. But you know what they say? It's darkest before dawn. Poland would take the next map, and another one, even with the most iconic tournament incident.
Spinner, kurwa, zapomniałem! Ja pierdolę, zapomniałem, że spinner jest, kurwa!
And then the next one, and another one, another one, and now both teams were at match point. Poland would take the lead and send the USA to the losers brackets. This secured Poland a top 2 finish. In the losers brackets, the USA won against the UK 7-4 and moved themselves back up to the grand finals. But it wouldn't be as simple as just winning against the Polish team. You see, due to the double elimination format the tournament was ran, the USA had to win twice against the Polish team, while Poland only had to win once. This put immense pressure on both teams, especially the Polish team, as this was a David versus Goliath situation. It began slow, both teams scoring 3 points each, but then the USA put themselves into overdrive and got 4 back-to-back map wins, securing the first match win. Their dominance showed that they may just win another title for a 3rd year in a row, but Team Poland would not settle for less. Although the US was in the lead with 5 points and Poland was slightly behind with 3, the underdogs then decided to repeat their actions from the bracket match and commenced yet another comeback. Poland was at match point, and all that was left was to perform on the following map. It was a very technical heavy map, and Poland, having one of the best players for said map, put the final nail in the coffin, with Wobblefulf deciding to have a pop-off in the grand finals.
My goodness. Wobblefulf.
Brawo, kurwa, mamy! Wygraliśmy!
Koniec drugiego miejsca! W końcu jest to! W końcu mamy pierwsze miejsce!
It was an incredible show of skill from the Polish side, having a performance of a lifetime. That unfortunately has not been replicated ever since, while the Team United States has gone on and won each and every single OWC up until the last year. But enough about some United States folks. We're here to explore a Polish legend who would continue to show why he is a player that should not be messed with. In the middle of the whole OWC fiasco, Rafis would go back to a certain map, not only to fix his score, but to also obliterate someone else. Although he would drop accuracy at the end of the map, he would become the second person to ever FC Everything Will Freeze. Sure, it was almost 2 years after Kukizi, but come on, that's Kukizi, it's not a fair competition. This score does however show how far ahead of everyone both Kukizi and Rafis were. Just look at the leaderboard! And come the year 2018, Rafis would show why he has an irreplaceable legacy. With the new year arriving, there were some players that would jump into the mix, like Mathy. This Mathy guy was starting to look like some fierce competition, being able to put out high 700 PP scores with really good DT accuracy. And Vaxe wouldn't go anywhere either. Rafis needed to get something big. He was able to set high PP scores, but there was something missing. And this void would be filled by the end of January, as he would play Necrophantasia, and while the rest is history.
Yes! 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 You pity we goat! Yes! You did it!
For the third time in his career, Rafis would take the #1 spot. First it was from HVIC, then from Kukizi, and now from Kukizi again, showing that in terms of DT play, he was the best there was. It is so insane to look back and see him go through these massive rivalries and somehow always ending up at the top. There was quite literally no one besides Rafis who was able to go above and beyond and push a player like Kukizi down from his throne. Or at least there weren't the right maps back then. You see, what makes Rafis so impressive is that he was able to push very specific maps to their limits. Besides him, no one would even dare to try Necrophantasia with double time. It just wasn't something any other top player was able to play. Most farm maps back then very often had some complex patterns for which you needed good finger control and or speed, especially in the prior years. I mean, to further prove how insane he was with DT at the time, he was the first person to ever get an A rank on cycle hit with DT. Rafis simply was the best there was at it. Not to mention, he was also incredible at stream maps, as he was the second person to ever FC Everything Will Freeze, even beating Kukizi's accuracy. And for these reasons, he has cemented himself as one of the best players to ever have touched the game. But why did I put such an emphasis on older maps? Well, there was essentially a mapping renaissance happening in Osu. There was an influx of newer farm maps, primarily being pushed by the infamous mapper Sotarks. And what I mean by newer is that they were objectively easier. They had easier patterns, easier to follow rhythms, and still gave a lot of PP. This paved the way for a new generation of players, one of them being Mathy. He made history by being the first ever person to set two 800 PP plays in the same day, one on Sunglow and the other on Kimi no Shiranai Monogatari. Even though Rafis could also reign supreme with DT jumps, to pump out such high PP scores at that rate was just not yet feasible for him. And even though it would take some time, on April 18th, Rafis would lose his number 1 position to Mathy. This play was watched by over 750 live in-game viewers. This was a massive event. And to say that the Osu community wasn't happy would be a massive understatement. Since Rafis had been around for many years now, he had built up a solid reputation which Mathy just could not rival. People were saying that Mathy didn't deserve to be number 1, that he was a DT one-trick, which is pretty funny to say because he was the first person to ever FC Genryu Kaiko, a map that had gone without an FC for over 3 years. A stream map at that. But obviously, people would turn a blind eye to Mathy's diversity, and solely focused on his top plays, which were mostly general farm maps from the 2018 era. Rafis would however put up a fight, retaking his number 1 position on April 22nd. But he would once again lose this position to Mathy on April 25th, and this would unfortunately be the last time Rafis would be number 1. According to Rafis, this was by far the most challenging era for him. Although he was one of the best overall DT players, jump spam maps were just not up his alley. He of course would try and improve at the skill set as jump maps became more and more common. However, it was obvious that he was now focusing more on what was fun for him. He had also been seeing great success from streaming in the last couple of years, and that has been his primary motivation to continue playing the game, stating that without his community, he most likely would have stopped playing the game a long time ago. But it's not like he stopped producing impressive scores, far from it. Now that he stopped feeling the pressure from grinding towards number 1, he could showcase his diverse skill set with plays like an FC on Freedom Dive Exile Dimension, and a hidden DTFC on Arc, before also dabbling into the new meta and setting a new top play on Blade Dance. It was obvious that Rafis was having more fun streaming and entertaining his audience than sitting down and grinding some uninteresting quarter rhythm maps. I mean, what is more interesting, this or this? You can also tell from his uploads he was having a lot of fun making content, and therefore he also had fun playing the game. And I mean, there was a reason he was popular as a person as well. Who doesn't find a Polish guy taking before setting bonkers plays entertaining? His combination of insane skill and entertaining streams has made people even more fond of him, even if he's no longer number 1.
Nice, that's a nice 700 PP, I totally dig it. Like, this is so good, like this is the 700 PP I can have. Like, I'm not a
Before entering the year 2020, he would reach 15,000 PP, showcasing that he can still keep up with the times.
Here we go, 15k.
And to begin the new year, he would once again showcase his prowess with double time by setting a new top play on Finest Sky.
Yes! 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 My new top play!
Yeah, 2020 was not the greatest year for many people, but considering Rafis was a content creator, he was now able to put in more time and effort into his streams and producing videos, repeating some old habits but to a much greater extent. I mean, the fact that he can still get a number 1 score while 11 deep is insane. Just goes to show that even though he left Poland, the Poland in him never did. You know what else didn't? His top player spirit.
Bro, what? What? 900 PP! Yes! Finally! Woo!
A 900 PP play, continuing to show that in terms of longevity, Rafis is unbeatable. As the years go by and players get not only better, but also at increasing rates, it is much harder to stay afloat, and Rafis, someone who has been playing the game since 2014 and being an active player in the top 50 since 2014, is the definition of longevity. He would also demonstrate his 3-mod ability with this score on Tsukinami. He would also demonstrate his diversity with a 3000 combo score on Firelight, which to this day, 3 years later, is the 3rd best score, outclassed only by Emrek, the literal best player in the game right now, and Zudinator, who can do these kinds of maps in her sleep. What would follow would be a streak of uploads of short clips from his streams, and some of these would rake in a lot of views, so I do respect the hustle. However, it would be like this for the remainder of 2021, but what was to follow is something I don't think anyone could have predicted. He would begin the year by playing a very infamous tech map, Psycho Hit, the same map he got the first DTA rank on. But look at his accuracy now, well over 97% going into the last section of the map. Not only is this the most nerve-inducing, but also the hardest part, and unfortunately he failed at the very last stream. He then decided to try and get a score on the map Kimi no Kyoku, and well...
This run.
If he hadn't missed, this would have been his very first 1000 PP play. That milestone is something that him and Kukizi had yet to achieve, with both of them having 1k chokes within the same month. Kukizi doing it on a newer version of Freedom Dive. How iconic. But unfortunately for both players, this would begin a sort of a curse, their inability to achieve a 1k PP score. But you'll see what I mean later. In the meantime, both players would return to the tournament scene, this year participating in the Perennial, both players teaming up in the same team. Obviously, alongside them were some other insane players, but who really cares when Rafis and Kukizi of all players were not just in the same tournament, but also in the same team? The team would go through the tournament looking really strong, getting all the way up to the upper bracket finals, with just a single map loss against the team Very Cool.
And it looks like he's going to be able to close this one out for them as well, going into the last sliver of map.
To play OC tournaments.
However, their next opponents would be Team Microwave Lobster, consisting of two arguably greatest tournament players of all time, and everyone else was also a strong face in the tournament scene. The number 1 seed Microwave Lobster would end up being victorious in this face-off, but it would most likely not be over. Although Rafis and his team was sent to the Losers Grand Finals, the team they were up against was Very Cool, which, if you recall, they won against 6-1. So, would Rafis and his team win the Grand Final? Yeah, they unfortunately lost against Team Very Cool, most likely because the team finally decided to practice the map bowl. Although this loss was unfortunate, Rafis and his team still got a profile badge, this one being Rafis' first profile badge since OWC 2017. Wow, look how much time has gone. However, Rafis would not slow down. He'd go on and set a number of 800 PP plays, like an FC on Confusion worth 887 PP, a great gameplay commentary explaining how to get an easy 878 PP play,
Teraz przerwa na rozluźnienie. Kolejny parcik. Teraz parcik, teraz luzik i teraz parcik będzie. Uwaga, wjeżdża parcik. I teraz przerwa na luz i teraz kolejny parcik wjeżdża. I teraz trudny parcik.
and another 800 on Open Your Eyes and Look North. Keep in mind, all these plays were set in just 2 days. Afterwards though, Rafis would get 2 tragic 1k PP chokes.
Wysi! Wysi!
Wow.
Something was off. He needed something that could get him over the edge. He had finally acquired a wooden keyboard, the keyboard that could turn the average player into a speed legend. What happens when you combine a veteran of the game and the wooden keyboard? Well, the results may shock you. Two 1k PP chokes, 2 other 900s and a high 800 PP play. And that was just the start. Just you wait until you see what he does next.
Ooh, let's go! Is that 1,000? Please! 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 No!
You cannot make this up, a 999 PP play. He was 0.076 PP away from his very first 1k. I would have given up by now, but that's also because I'm not Rafis, who is a totally different beast. He would continue to grind the game, although primarily playing speed maps. He would play the occasional Nomad map and produce some insane scores like this one.
Let's try single tap.
However, his curse would unfortunately continue by him getting a 1k PP score? Yeah, Rafis got his theoretically first 1k, but it's an edited version of a map, therefore it is unranked and will not give him any PP at all. By now, 900s were becoming a common occurrence for Rafis. This was signaling that a 1k was just behind the corner, and he once again would come really close. He would finally FC Kimi no Kyoku, and he had the accuracy. The map was ranked, so where's the problem? For crying out loud, he didn't use hidden, but I mean, based? Around this time, a map by the name of, I'm just going to call it Joshin. An FC with good enough accuracy would grant the player well over 1.1k PP. Now, the tricky part is actually FCing the map, because it is not the easiest thing to do, but Rafis would still give it a try. He peaked at slightly over 1000 before slider breaking and a couple of seconds later chain missing. He finished off the run with a total of 8 misses and 1 slider break. Although to some this might seem like a lot, this was a pretty clear sign that with plenty of practice and grinding, Rafis could maybe do it. Though judging by his uploads, he would put this map away for now. But now, it was time for Rafis to prove once again that he is a powerhouse in tournament play as well. He participated in the Resurrection Cup 2023 with a team that would only show up in a tournament player's worst nightmare. I mean, look at this roster, almost all of the greatest Polish players and some more firepower. Although Rafis' team was stacked, they placed second in the qualifier seed. And who was the number 1 seed, you may ask? Well, let's just say the tournament would boil down to just these 2 teams. And that is essentially what happened. Rafis' team went into the bracket finals with only a single map loss in the match against Sleep Accommodation, which was the number 3 seed. Yeah, this just goes to show how insane of a roster the 2 top teams were. The team fresh off the boat would also sweep their way into the upper bracket finals without losing a single map throughout the previous 3 matches. The 2 teams would face off for the first time, and it would seem like it was S's game at first, winning 5 straight maps in a row. Yeah, it was fair to assume that it was over for fresh off the boat. But if you know anything about OSU tournaments, the results can change in an instant. Fresh off the boat would finally take their first point, then another one, then another one, and one more, and
the roster of ESSA is just too strong for them to compete on this boat. We'll go again.
Yeah, even though they tried very well, the powerhouse that was ESSA was just too much for fresh off the boat, and the team would be sent into the lower bracket finals. They would dominate there once more though. Their utter domination over the team's Sleep Accommodation just shows that the entire tournament was more ESSA versus fresh off the boat. The 2 teams were just overqualified compared to literally any other team. But now it was time for grand finals. If Rafis' team were to win this match, it would be the first time since OWC 2017 that Rafis would win a tournament. In the beginning, the match was fairly close. The teams would throw points at each other, getting to 3-3. It seemed like it would be a really close match, but what would follow is what I would call straight up bullying. Team ESSA would go on and win every single map, winning the entire tournament, and Rafis securing his 4th and currently last tournament badge. Although he would prove to be victorious, his curse would continue as 1k PP chokes were back at it. Obviously, if you put enough time and effort into something, it will most likely pay off. But it is always surprising to actually see the results. The same thing was happening to Rafis and his stamina.
Who am I? Like, I could barely get 93.
So with this new and increased stamina, he would take another step closer to getting a 1k PP score. He would end the year 2023 with a total of 7 1k PP chokes, 1 unranked 1k, and the Kimi no Kyoku play where if he had used hidden, he would have gotten a 1k. But even after every loss, Rafis wouldn't stop. This kind of dedication does not come from any typical player. And well, as we all know, Rafis is not a typical player. 2023 marked the 10-year anniversary of Rafis playing the game. On top of that, it marked his 9th year being not just in the top 100, but also the top 50. The only other person who had ever achieved this feat was Wobblefulf, who was in the top 50 from 2009 to 2019. And at the rate at which Rafis was pumping out high PP scores in 2023, it seemed like he would achieve the same 10-year mark as Wobblefulf in the following year. But all that glitters is not gold. Although Rafis would begin the year by being at the number 32 spot, with the influx of new maps, more and more players were being able to pump out high PP scores left and right. Get it? Like the Brazil map? Lol. For Rafis to become the second ever person to stay in the top 50 for over 10 years, he would need to stay afloat until July 9th. But already by the end of May, he was at rank 49, and with no signs of him putting out any scores, it seemed like it would be over for the Polish veteran. He finally did it. Not only did he save himself from falling out of the top 50, he got the pinnacle of Osu milestones, a 1000 PP play. The curse was okay, but like, yeah, he is not beating the curse allegations. But do you remember me mentioning Rafis playing this one stream map a while back? What was it called? Oh yeah, Joshin. Well, he tried it again. And try again he did.
Ja! Co ja zrobiłem? O! Trafiłem na mapie? 99! O! 1100! Ja p***dolę! I'm not going anywhere! Holy
This was the no-mod PP record for a solid 4 days. But this still goes to show that Rafis' ability to be a long-standing top player is something that honestly may never be matched. Funny thing is, someone a day prior recommended Rafis to FC the map in a multiplayer lobby. I just love the response of Rafis saying, "I owe you a beer." That is like the most Polish thing he could have said. He would continue his insane no-mod reign with a fail on Pain Remains 2, failing at the last 100 combo of a 5-minute map. Yeah, I suppose some curses may lighten, but never fully go away. But all jokes aside, Rafis decided to go on a speed and stamina rampage, gaining 10 ranks by FCing We Got It, Tweaker, and more notably, Mr. Gaming myself, being the second person ever to do it with hidden double time.
Let's go. Wait, say that as Matthew.
Rafis has and will continue to go down in OSU history as the longest standing top player. Although this title may be overtaken by someone, that will not be due for at least another half a decade, and who knows what the game will look like by then. Comparing the top 50 from 10 years ago to what it is now is just unfathomable. No one back then even had 10 KPP, and although many players here are still recognizable, there's but one player who is not just in the top 50, not just the top 100, but the top 200 to this day. And that, of course, is Rafis. And theoretically Cookiezi, but he was banned from November 2013 to November 2015. However, what Rafis was able to do that quite literally no one else has been able to, including Cookiezi, was not just to continue on playing the game for over a decade, but also adapt to and improve at the ever-changing game that is OSU. And although I wish to go on and on, I simply lack the vocabulary to emphasize how irreplaceable Rafis and his legacy is. So I will end this video with this brief montage of the 11 years Rafis has cemented in the game's legacy.
Song is rocking and it's ready to go. Just now the countdown is started and it's ready to blow.